Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Bill. How are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah. How was
You?
the week? Well, okay, sorry. How's the week trending? Let's talk about it like that.
Still one more, right?
Yeah.
It's trending good. It's been
Okay.
rocky in a couple spots, and I've had to kind of take on a couple new challenges that I've had to adjust to. So I
Hmm.
put out a quote yesterday in Slack that I came across that hit home with me
Yeah.
around it's not exactly how much stuff you have to deal with, it's how quickly you can bounce back from the
That's
different things.
yeah.
You know,
Like that was a great post because that is fundamentally what separates the people who stay in
a
the
healthy space.
field, right? And the people who don't. Like,
Right.
last week, not a great week, right? I was struggling at the end of it, right? And the week before that was less than ideal, right? But this is why we journal and meditate and self-care and everything else like that, because you got to be able to process that stuff and work through it so that way you can come back and be dialed in for like the next week. There was a thing whenever I was a poker player, and my one of my coaches, he beat me over the head with this all the time. And he goes, "You are not playing this hand if you were stressed about the last hand. If you're trying to figure out why you lost that last hand, write it down, put it in your systems, and focus on being present in the hand that you're in right now."
Mhm.
Right? Don't think about the last time you lost with queens when you have queens again. Don't think about like how badly you want to stick ace queen all up in some guy's eye because he did it to you earlier. Like, none of that stuff is helpful. You are focused on one thing, playing this hand at the best level possible, right? So if that means you have to go out and go do a bunch of weightlifting and endurance sports and stuff like that between your sessions, but between your days, that's totally fine. Like, that's what that stuff is there for. There's a
Mhm.
reason why there's a whole lot of jacked salespeople, right, running around, and people who are highly competitive in sales. Good morning,
Yeah.
Jordan. Good morning, Mike, Mr. Regular.
What's
So,
up?
Mr. Regular went after me a little bit yesterday. Not really went after me, but I do think I need to clarify one thing just real quick.
Okay.
I am not anti notification. I am anti get my needs met notifications. Right. So when I was complaining the other day about the ad everybody, it was in relation to what was being tagged as at everybody. It was lead gen material. It was that kind of thing. Certain notifications are worth talking about, like new
Uh,
members and stuff like that. So,
I got you. Gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's that's a whole nother subject, right?
that is a whole other topic for sure. Yeah,
But
just
yeah,
wanted to make sure that I'm clear on that. Like, notifications are important. They're there for a reason, just
yeah,
not for like you can use them to get your needs met, or you can use them for the good of the community, in my
for sure,
opinion.
for sure. And I'm sure I guess will have something to say about notifications and
You
salespeople
don't.
when we talk
You,
about it, right?
yeah, you don't know what you don't know. It's true. Good morning, Michelle. How are you? Oh, Michelle. Oh, just so you know, Bill, Michelle left some things for you with me. And I have not told you this week because I'm a terrible Bill, but I have some things for you that Michelle left for you whenever she was in town. And I had some jelly last night and it was delicious, of my own,
Oh,
not yours, but yeah,
okay, good.
it was so good.
Then we would be fighting. So I'm glad that.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you. I think she messaged me on Facebook. I have a message pending over there. So
Yep.
uh, cool, cool. Well, I'm super excited because the timing for our guest this week couldn't be better, honestly.
Yeah,
Like
agreed.
you've had a couple rough weeks. I've had a rough week. We
Hmm.
both talk about this stuff all the time, at least from a certain angle. Obviously, everyone's got
Sure.
different context, which is super cool. I'd be part of the conversation. So I say we bring him on, shall we?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, let's go. Jeff, here you come.
Good
Hello,
morning.
Jeff. How are
Good
you?
morning, Jeff. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I was enjoying the poker analogy. It's spot on. I was a bit of a poker player myself. Nothing, no professional by any means, but certainly enjoy it when I get together with some friends. So I love it.
Yeah, when I say professional, I like it's not at the level that people think that it is. The just playing full time, right? It's a much better way to like talk about it because now there's like all the celebrityness around poker and bracelet winner. I wasn't anywhere near that level. I was just paying my bills with it. So, but yeah, there's a huge mental side to poker, just like there is one to sales. So I talk a lot about that overlap, about how to focus and dial it in for this conversation, for this sprint, for whatever you're working on. But I learned about it there. So, man, I'm so excited to have you here. So everybody knows, I've never had a conversation with Jeff before. I follow him on LinkedIn. I really like his posts. A couple of months ago during Mental Health Awareness Month, he was advising anyone who was on the mental health banner to like change their banner logo. And I am a big fan, so I went and did that. So I just think that was really, really, really cool. But yeah, man, I was reading some of your stuff last night, and I would love to start with a question. How does somebody build resiliency as a salesperson?
Yeah, that's a huge question. There's a lot of different ways to answer that. I think the sort of biggest first step is to understand, I guess, what mental health is, but to building awareness around what your own mental health feels like and what declining mental health feels like in yourself. I think that's like a huge thing, because you can't be resilient if you don't know where you are, how you're showing up every single day. Mental health, I think a lot of people, like, one of the biggest misconceptions that I see on a regular basis, and I posted about this today, was a lot of people in their head, their definition of mental health is just immediate lines to much closer to mental illness. So those who are like really unwell, versus thinking of mental health of this spectrum of well-being that we're all fluctuating along on a daily basis based on what's happening in our internal environment, like our thoughts, our feelings, and emotions, as well as our external environment. So the stressors that we're facing, the people we interact with, getting stuck in traffic, having to commute, that sort of doom and gloom news that we hear, all these stressors can kind of impact how we fluctuate up and down that spectrum. So resilience, and kind of the way I think about it, is being able to mitigate how much fluctuation that's taking place along that mental health spectrum, and keeping you in a state where you're thriving, or at least coping in a healthy way with these different stresses on an ongoing basis. So awareness is number one. I guess just some like quick ways to build awareness around sort of like your own mental health, so you can kind of get an idea. You want to think about it as 4 different buckets to be aware of. So you want to be aware of changes to your thoughts, so changes to your thinking on a daily basis. Are they becoming more negative? Another big kind of thing to think of is what if statements. If you get yourself in that cycle of what if, that's a sign that you're changing, your thoughts have changed and you're becoming less resilient. You're moving down that mental health spectrum. Then there's going to be changes to your emotions. That's something that we usually relate to. Do you start to navigate and start feel a lot of difficult emotions, or can you not tell what you're feeling? You have sort of like an emotional blindness. That's a big thing. Changes to somatic symptoms. So these are going to be sort of changes to what you feel physically. For me, I get this like pain in my upper right side. You might get a tight chest, or you might have night sweats in the middle of the night. Changes to what you're feeling physically or somatically. And the last big one that you want to keep aware of is changes to the habits. Do you start engaging in bad habits on an ongoing basis? So are you scrolling on your phone more? Are you not talking to your friends? Do you normally call your mom every night? You're not calling her as much. Do you have, instead of having maybe 1 or 2 drinks a week, are you having 6 or 7 drinks a week? Like, it's changes to those habits that you want to be aware of as a way to kind of get a sense of all 4 of these buckets. When those start to change, you're moving down that mental health spectrum. So that's what you really want to kind of be aware of, the changes.
Well, that what if statement, man, I have been the what if guy, like many times. And like, I've never really tied that to like a mindset shift or, a change in thinking and stuff like that. But like, that is very, very interesting. That might be my nugget for this whole conversation, honestly, because I've been there a whole lot. Wow, that's really cool. Man, okay, Jake.
Yeah.
Hop in, buddy. I know you have some questions.
Good. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I gotta find my spot. I'm actually curious how you got into this space. So did you start in the mental health side or the sales side first and bring the other in?
So I was straight out of kind of university, went straight into sales. And I sort of got into this sort of through my own experience with mental health. So my first sales role, I was being measured on whether or not I could make $200 a day, achieve 2.5 hours of talk time. If you weren't hitting your metrics, you were let go very quickly. So it's very much just sort of sink or swim, very psychologically unsafe environment.
Mhm.
So I managed to do really well from an individual contributor level. I went on to kind of be a top rep, win all sorts of cool incentives, all that good stuff. But behind the scenes, I was not okay. I had really bad anxiety. I had insomnia, and then I get these really nasty panic attacks in the middle of the night. And it was after the third panic attack that put me in the hospital when I realized that, well, this is no good. I need to do something about this. And that's when first thing I did, I went to see my doctor. He prescribed me some anxiety medication, which I tried for 2 to 3 months, and I didn't really like how it made me feel. I felt like I lost touch with my intuition and my emotions and the things I was relying on to be a top performer and connect to people I was selling to.
Mhm.
And going to therapy 10 years ago was still highly stigmatized. So
Yeah.
I stopped taking the medication, and I sort of made this kind of commitment where I started to learn everything that I possibly could around mental health. How does the brain react to stress? What are all the different levers that we can start pulling on it within ourselves on a daily basis to improve this? And didn't really understand how important this was until fast forward to July of 2018. I had just launched my first sales consulting website, and 3 days after that, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. So life threw this
wow.
crazy curveball that I wasn't ready for. But it's sort of through that experience when I realized that the same strategies I was using to take care of my mental health and sales, I naturally started to execute on during this next stressful period of my life. And getting a diagnosis like that really shifted a lot of my priorities and my perspective. And that's when I realized that, holy smokes, like anxiety in sales is not optional. It's really part of everyday life. And when teams become anxious, depressed, and burnt out, and their performance really starts to suffer. So how do we shift the dialogue around this to really start thinking of employees and salespeople specifically who I work with as these corporate athletes that need to show up and perform every single day, and looking for ways to equip them with different toolkits to navigate the unique stressors that they face in their role in a mentally healthy way. So it was a bit of a roundabout way, but that's kind of my journey into this space.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I especially because this is not a thing that you see happen a lot. Where I mean, mental health in most spaces is still something that people are talking about, but not adopting even at high levels. So that's what made me so curious. And I was actually watching yesterday a Hot Ones episode with Tony Hawk, where he was doing like the Pocky One Chip Challenge, and he was talking about, hey, how you handle all this anxiety, because you just do some of the most difficult things in the world. And he said, well, I'll tell you what about. I guess they were filming it in August, and he said, Tony Hawk goes, in March, I broke my leg, and the bone was sticking out. The femur was sticking out at the top of my leg. And this is like last year. And he's like, what, 50 now or
Yeah.
something? And he said, I learned more about my own mental health and resilience in that moment after all this stuff I'd done in the past years to help myself bounce back after a drop or a bad score or whatever it was like that. He goes, in that moment, I had the ability, because I had all that practice, to say, please take me to this hospital instead of this hospital, because I know the head of ER over there and he's going to take care of me. So he didn't get in front of a doctor for an hour and a half after he did that to his leg. But he 100% said it's all due to the fact that I've practiced this stuff for years and years. And I got to make a choice in a time period when most people are just freaking out and wanting the pain to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all kind of get there in different ways, right? And figuring out, and some of us just don't get as far and have trouble. So if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a little more about the cancer, right?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Because that's one of those things I feel like you don't really know what it feels like until you're in it. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, like, it was just like I was just blindsided, like, for sure. Like, at the time I was probably, I'm in better shape now, but at the time I was in the best shape of my life. At the time I was exercising every day. I wasn't like, I definitely partied a lot more when I was first getting into sales, but it was like one of those things that I was like healthy. I was taking care of myself, wasn't drinking that much. I was, and I still am in a very healthy relationship, and all of those boxes that you would kind of say that you're ticking to kind of take care of yourself, I was pretty on top of that. So yeah, I was blindsided. Came out of nowhere. And I think what part of kind of the way I thought about it and navigated it was, if I'm 30 years old back then and I didn't know about this and I was blindsided, I need to tell as many people as possible. Like, a lot of people kind of close off a lot of their friends and family. I was the exact opposite. I was like, and I think that's something that I learned through my experience with mental health, was the more you can talk about it, the more you can kind of like engage and build that support system. So I was like telling everybody, but I also had in my head, if I need to tell as many people as possible, because there's other 30-year-olds out there that don't realize that it's 30, and I think it's after 6 or after 50 when testicular cancer is higher for men. So I used it as this opportunity to say, like, how do I tell as many people as possible about this to help build awareness around this? And that's, again, a simple strategy that if you think about mental health and anxiety and resilience, it's like when you start to get anxious, the camera, your internal camera, starts to shift onto you, and it starts zooming in closer and closer and closer on the worst case scenarios, what's going to happen. Your tiny little imperfections start to become big imperfections. But if you can flip that before you're going into a call with a client or public speaking, or going into maybe a situation where you're more of an introvert and nervous about sort of a social gathering, if you can flip it to how can I create the best experience for the people I'm about to interact with, or how can I serve others as best as possible every single day, and you flip that camera off of yourself and really focus on serving and giving back and genuinely trying to make a difference in the people that you're interacting with, that makes a huge difference in how you kind of navigate uncertainty and anxiety. So that was something that really helped me.
That's crazy, man. I think they've actually named it now in the psychology wing. It is catastrophizing, something like that, because it's you make things turn into catastrophes in your brain and you keep spinning. When that could have been a blip, right?
Yeah, like there's so many of these like catastrophizing is assuming worst case scenario. There's like another one where you get in the kind of this idea of shoulding, like I should do this, I should do this. So it's like kind of having a toolkit of all the different cognitive biases that can exist, because your brain will typically lean on some of these unhelpful biases when it's overwhelmed or it's stressed or it's nervous, to primarily help you avoid doing certain things, when the exact opposite you need to do is kind of lean into that discomfort and face it head on.
Where do you see this most prevalent? This just like in a standard sales department, marketing department, revenue department. Where do you see this like really huge red?
Where do you see the most messed up mental health? Is it?
Where the really bad?
Yeah, I mean, like it's across the board right now. It's entirely like, it's not kind of focused primarily on sales. It's like everyone is struggling. There's a lot of leftover, kind of not leftover, but a lot of residual burnout coming from the pandemic. I think what a lot of leaders aren't realizing is that was probably the biggest environmental stressor that everyone on the planet essentially has gone through in their lifetime. And that change and that stress, that uncertainty, that takes its toll. And it's not like we recognize that in the moment and kind of realized, okay, how do we start really navigate this in an effective way? Plus, a lot of people went into that time without sort of a toolkit, without being aware of their mental health, which hit them hardest. I found that the people that navigated the pandemic the best were already taking really good care of their mental health and kind of had different strategies to cope with stressors. So that's like a big thing, I think, specific to sales. Some data that I found, because that's the area that I focus on. Prior to the pandemic, if you kind of looked at sort of typical, the average population, you would have found that 1 in 5 people will typically struggle with their mental health in any given year. Prior to the pandemic, when I looked at salespeople specifically, it was over 2 in 5, so it's 43%. So it's more than double. In May of 2021, when I kind of took that sort of survey again and partnered with some Richard Harris and Uncrush, and we gathered almost 800 responses, we found that 58% of salespeople were struggling with their mental health, which is crazy. And then we just did it again in May of 2022, and now that numbers jumped to 63% of salespeople are struggling with their mental health. So
good word.
So over 3 in 5 have gotten or are struggling with their mental health. So if you think about this industry, the sales industry that's so focused on high performance best, it's like you can't perform if over half, significantly more than half of your team is not like showing up in a mentally healthy state every day. It's just not possible. You can't cheat that science. So I'm committed to kind of getting more data out there and kind of talk, but it's something that's been challenging to kind of pull sort of a lot of these sales leaders out of this old school way of thinking and think about mental health is only like illness. It's been challenging, but we're making progress, which is good.
Okay, so I have some questions.
Yeah, go for
So
it.
when there's a weird kind of like space right inside of sales, right? Because there's a whole lot of people who are just essentially kind of thriving off of mindset juice, right? The things they tell themselves, and that keeps their head down. And like I talk to all my clients about journaling and why it's important, and it's a way to kind of see how you're talking to yourself and stuff. And it's one of the hardest things for me to get people to do, right, is to like
Mhm.
build a journaling practice. Is that where you suggest people to start with this stuff, to kind of like start building some mindfulness? Like what is that first step if someone is like, hey, I don't even know where to start with this thing? Where do you point them to?
Yeah, like it's funny. It's like the simple stuff that matters can make the biggest difference. So if I'm working with a team or like a new rep, for example, first thing, like the three fundamental pillars that I would always start with is like, are you sleeping? What are you putting in your body nutrition wise?
Mm-hmm.
And are you exercising on a regular basis? It's like those three things have to be like present and the foundation like that. Like if you're not kind of executing or kind of navigating or creating a routines and habits around making sure those buckets are met on an ongoing basis, it's like a house of cards. Like the rest of the stuff will kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
After that, then you can kind of start looking at different things. Like there's, breath work that you can layer on top. You can start looking at sort of meditation and journaling to help kind of optimize thinking, or gratitude practice. You can start looking at how often is someone going outside and spending time in sunlight. They spending time with people that kind of lift them up, or are they surrounded with different within and like people that bring them down? Like there's all these other kind of like things that have or areas that you can start to focus on. But if that sleep, nutrition, and exercise isn't there, none of the other stuff is really going to matter. And it's going to be very hard to kind of change some of the habits if you aren't kind of in that place. Like the human body is built to take on stress and navigate stress, but you have to put it in a position where it can do that on a regular basis.
Yeah, you got to be able to rest. I read a book about endurance training once by this guy named Maffetone, and it was like it really kind of changed how I think about training and practice and growth. And I'm not an endurance athlete, but was trying to build a running habit at the time. And like on the third page, he was like, training is exercise plus rest, so you can perform well. And I was like, I can be very, very stubborn and rigid. Jake will tell you. But like, I just saw that and it just hit me just right. And I was like, oh yeah, I need to rest occasionally. That's what and it was like the first time someone had ever told me this concept of like, hey man, you got to rest, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard because, so many salespeople are kind of just putting their head down into kind of like hustle mode of just like, if I keep calling, if I keep trying, if I keep just putting sheer will and effort into this thing, we're going to get there. How do
Yeah.
you talk
But,
about the difference
uh,
between being thoughtful and just doing the work?
yeah, I guess one thing I'll add to something that you just said as well, which is sort of that idea around rest and recovery.
Yeah.
It's so critical, and I think there's like a lot of people know boundaries are important, and setting boundaries is with work. It's like, yeah, we get that we need to do it, but like that's the first, like we're really bad at it. And the way I think about boundaries is giving yourself enough time to add stress and offload stress in equal parts each day. Like that absolutely needs to be critical. That's kind of what boundaries are designed to do. Like stress is not inherently bad. Stress is like a really positive thing that we need to use to grow and do hard things, to have the energy and feel motivated every single day. Like the right level of stress is very, very good. The problem is when it gets to become chronic stress, or those stress levels spike before kind of things that we need to perform on. So boundaries need to be there to, like I said, offload stress in equal parts each day. But where a lot of salespeople, workers in general, get really bad at is trying to, one, they neglect boundaries, and then they try to offload stress all at once at the end of a quarter or on a 1 week vacation. And what they don't realize is, in that time leading up to that 1 week vacation or that sort of that time off, that stress is moving out of that high performance zone into that zone where it's impacting your performance, making it harder to make good decisions, making it harder to be creative, making it harder for you to problem solve, leading to more and more boundaries getting neglected because you have to work longer to try and figure out a problem that would normally take you 10 minutes to solve. So it's this nasty, nasty spiral that you're going into. And then, like I said, trying to offload it all at once when your performance is being crap all the way up into that point.
And I'm reading a book right now by a client of mine. It's about peak performance. And one of the things, the metaphor I just never heard this way, the same thing around rest, is that we literally, the Matrix showed us this, right? We create energy where we literally create, those charges, and we're like batteries. And that when your battery goes down, you don't keep riding your battery. You recharge your battery. And that he says daily, you have to recharge your battery if you want to perform the next day. And there's no if and the buts about it. You are a battery that needs recharging otherwise, why would we need to sleep? Why would that be built into our physiology?
Yeah, no, like there's like the one book I recommend everyone is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It's just like it's like such an incredible book. It goes into all of the latest research and the data and looks at sleep from every different angle that you could possibly think of why it's important to exercise, to creative thought, to what are all the kind of like, what are the negative consequences of kind of like neglecting your sleep long term. It's a fascinating book, and yeah, it absolutely needs to be a priority for people is to get their sleep every day.
Yep.
So thanks for that, because for a long time I didn't put any effort into my sleep at all, and there was a long period of time when I was really kind of coming into this version of selling. I was working with a coach and was building a website design company with a buddy, but I was still going to go play poker until like sometimes 3 or 4 in the morning, right? And couldn't understand why I was so tired on the drive home from work each day. And my partner in the business was already on this path, like he'd already figured out that he'd had insomnia, and so he was really kind of dialing in his sleep and his eating habits and drinking less and everything. And me being me, I kind of had that moment of like, man, that sounds boring. That sounds like, whoa, like, is it even worth doing, at that level? So now I'm a little bit older, a little bit wiser, not much. And now I try to prioritize these things.
It's the beard.
Yeah, it's the beard. So how do you know when to put your head down and just ignore things, focus on the discipline, focus on the reps? And how do you know when you need to kind of like pick your head up and be like, am I in the right spot? Am I selling a good product? Am I on a good team? Am I working for a good leader? Like, how do you navigate that as a salesperson if you're younger, if you're newer?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think like this, a lot of organizations aren't doing a great job at this. So I think you can have the best mental health toolkit and stress management toolkit, resilience toolkit on the planet. But if you find yourself in an environment that doesn't provide psychological safety, that makes you feel afraid, that like impacts your self-esteem every single day, like eventually like it's going to get worn down, and it's going to be very tough, especially for a new rep who doesn't necessarily have sort of an experience, and like this is their first experience like I had. It's going to be hard. So yeah, to your point, like I don't have a good answer. Like finding the right environment is really important. I think some of the main things that you'd want to look out for, like some of the questions that I would ask is to help kind of navigate before you find yourself in an environment like this, is ask questions like, hey, like the pandemic was, one of the biggest stressors that we've all faced. Like, how did you support your team with their mental health during COVID? When a salesperson misses their sales target, how are they treated? Like, what happens to them? Like, good sales, like if anyone's been in sales on, like, good salespeople miss their target occasionally. Like, this is just a fact. And if if that sales leader kind of discredits that, then probably not the right person to be working for. And I have a list of questions on Sales Health Alliance that people can kind of look up, just search toxic environments, and how to avoid them. Are there boundaries around kind of like disconnecting? Is there Slack hygiene in place to, like, when should I be responding to messages at work? Questions around that. And you might kind of be hearing these questions right now and be like, I'd never ask these questions. Like, I'm never going to get the job if I ask these questions. And in reality, like, that's a good thing. Like, if you don't get the job because you're asking questions around mental health, trust me, you're saving yourself from a very toxic environment, and a sales leader that will be messaging late, expecting to be on, expecting to hit every month, and then punishing you when you don't. Like, it just, those are the things you want to draw out. So asking these difficult questions in the interview can save you from a bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you said that, because that is really the nugget, right? You can ask any question, right? How people respond to it is sometimes very indicative of whether or not they even have an answer, right? So if you show up, because there's all this stuff on LinkedIn, do you ask these hard questions? Do you ask, like, how many people are hitting goal? How many people are on the OTE track? And how many people are on a PIP? And how many people have left? And then, well, I can't ask those questions, because it's gonna DQ me. Good. You don't want to work there anyway. Right. Yeah. Like, you need to go back and go find someone who is worth working for. And on the other side of that, I spent a long time kind of thinking that, well, if I don't like this environment, therefore the environment has to be bad. Right. And as I get older and I study more about personalities and preferences and things like this, it's not that black or white. Right. So there is some, in my opinion, you got to figure out the right thing for you, because the things that draw me in about a product or a service or a sales culture aren't going to be necessarily the same thing for that somebody else would enjoy. That's okay, right? So I think you really kind of have to know your stuff, because in sales there's like a whole lot of, there's like two camps, right? It's like the grass isn't always greener, so just stay where you are, put in the work, and then the other one is like, be wary of bad leadership, bad products, and get out of there as soon as possible. But in the beginning, you don't know what you don't know. Like your first sales leader, hell, heaven, or whatever, like, that's the only thing you know. And so if you have a bad interaction there and that ruins you, like, which has happened to lots and lots and lots of people, unfortunately, that's just unfortunate. But
the other thing I will add to that, because it's important to distinguish as well, is that, you can't expect to be, like, in a perfect environment all the time. And I think what a lot of people misperceive is they place a lot of, when that mental health, think about that spectrum, when we start to move from thriving to a situation where we're coping or struggling or even unwell, most of us will look at things to blame, look at things to sort of external factors that we say, it's not us, it's this. And one of the core symptoms of burnout, for example, is we become more irritable, we become disengaged from things that we previously really enjoyed, whether that's a job we loved 6 months earlier, or a hobby or routine. So to your point, you're absolutely right. Sometimes if we aren't taking care of ourselves, our natural perspective of work is going to be less positive. Like, we are naturally going to be thinking that this is a negative environment. So for sure, at an individual level, step one is you have to make sure that you're meeting those core buckets every single day and taking care of yourself, because then that's the only time you'll be able to think clearly about your current work environment to make a decision about, should I stay or should I go? That's, like, really important.
I'd like to switch gears for just a second and kind of transition onto the leadership side, right? Because, a couple of things, right? There's still some stigma around, like, mental health and, self-care and things like that. How do leaders begin to talk about this stuff with their reps? Like, are there certain areas that are easier to approach? Is it, just hire Jeff and bring Jeff in? Like how do people begin to kind of pave that path? Because, it's a big conversation.
Yeah, like it seems overwhelming. I get it, but it actually doesn't need to be overwhelming. Like leaders can do very basic things on a daily and a consistent basis. And kind of like the main thing that I sort of talk about is like you need to lead with vulnerability. Like if you think about there's something that exists within sales and specifically within sales, but the workplace in general, called the vulnerability paradox, which is how likely would you two be to be vulnerable with someone who's judging your performance every single day?
Yeah.
The answer is I would not be vulnerable at all. And that's the kind of paradox that exists within leaders is when a rep is underperforming, they want to kind of get to the root cause of that. Usually the root cause is something emotional, something self-esteem related, something that they're like uncomfortable sharing.
Mm-hmm.
So if that rep looks at that leader as someone that's a judge, a perfectionist, that kind of like no one wants to have a vulnerable conversation with a judgmental perfectionist. It just doesn't happen. So like
hold on. I just figured out why all my conversations are terrible. Hold on.
Yeah, say that again. Repeat that. So he gets
awesome.
it just right.
yeah. So as a leader, this is what you're like. This is if you think just because of the way sales is structured, and you are there to help with performance, like
Mm-hmm.
you naturally are being perceived as a judge. But the way you can kind of combat that is again leading with vulnerability by saying like I've yet to meet a sales leader that hasn't struggled at some point with their mental health during their career, even if that's at the very basic level, a couple weeks of not sleeping right because they're nervous about target. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to open up and share those stories to make yourself more approachable. It's starting meetings not by saying, I have to be perfect every day. Starting meetings by saying, like if you're showing up tired because you're a new parent and your baby kept you up all night, and saying, hey team, like just want to let you know, like I'm a little tired today because my newborn kept me up. Like if I'm short with you or I don't respond to your Slack messages, just know nothing is wrong. Like this is just something that I'm kind of struggling with today. And
Mm-hmm.
doing that consistently on an ongoing basis will make you look like a human and just say, we all struggle with things on an ongoing basis. And when that rep is struggling with their sleep or they face that setback that is relatable, they're going to be more likely to come to you and talk to you about this stuff. So vulnerability is a huge thing. Ensuring helping your team set proper boundaries is another good one. Leading, like having ongoing career pathing conversations is again a free basic thing that you can do that our data has shown connects. Like when sales leaders have more consistent career pathing conversations, not only does mental health improve, but also sales performance improve. So there's things around that. There's things around, are your reps finding meaning and purpose in the roles? The thing about extrinsic motivators, the more you extrinsically motivate someone, the less intrinsically motivated they become. So the more you're offering these rewards and focus on the outcomes, the more you're like, that's all these like dopamine driven extrinsic motivators, the more you do that, the less intrinsically motivated someone's going to be. So that's making work less meaningful for them. You have to keep providing more and more rewards. I think one of my favorite studies of all time was done on like kids in school. I think it was like grade 4 or 5. And what they did was they took a bunch of kids that really enjoyed painting, and something that they would intrinsically do all the time. Yeah, they would just like they loved to paint. And then what they started doing was they started offering gold stars and rewarding kids for how they painted. And what was really unfortunate about this was at the end of the experiment, when they stopped providing gold stars, this action that kids really enjoyed, they stopped doing. They would no longer be intrinsically motivated, and they would only do it if they were getting a gold star. And just think about what's happened over the last 80 years of sales and performance management across in the workplace.
Spiffs and all
like,
that stuff. Just dangle it in front of them and they'll go sell it, kind of thing.
But the crazy part is that you've essentially conditioned an entire industry, millions upon millions of people, that this is how they need to be motivated. So like we're all on this like dopamine addiction that's going to take a long time for us to wean off, but it's really, really important if you want employees to be engaged, self-motivated, emotionally connected to their work, have that servant mentality, it's critical that we move away from this spiff reward type model, because it's not sustainable and it just pushes people towards burnout.
So I've got a podcast. It's called Sales Dogs, the Pavlovian response to our current day sales system.
Yeah.
We're all just dogs running around chasing a bell.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like the best way I can think about it is if you guys right now were to do as many push-ups as you could do it, whatever number you have. So you can do 25 push-ups in a row. That's the max that you can do. And and then after that, someone came to you and said, hey, I will give you $50 if you do that again. And you'll go and you'll tough out, muscle out sort of another 25 push-ups, and you'll do it, and you'll barely make it to the end. And then at the end of that, what if he said after that, well, I'll give you $1,000 to do it again? You would do it. And eventually you get to this point where your body literally couldn't do it anymore. You just be like collapse on the ground. Everything would hurt. And rather than if you stopped after the first time and you could do it again the next day, it would take you multiple days to recover because your body would be so sore. Like that's like physical health is the same as sort of mental health in this state, where if we keep offering these rewards and pushing people out, not allowing for rest, and push people out of this situation where they can recover and achieve that consistent growth over time, like it just doesn't work. Like it's just really, really damaging. Like we will keep doing things for rewards until we are physically burnt out.
Yeah. Going back to the poker thing, I don't play poker the same way anymore. Now that I've like done it professionally and it like has paid the bills and things, because when I was playing full time, I would start to like lock in wins is what it's called. Right. And so like I would go, I'd play and I'd play and I'd play and I'd play. And then once I hit kind of my nut for the month of, bills and everything, my drive to want to play would be overridden with like, well, we've already made our money for the month and we really want to kind of put it back in play. Right. And so like the risk reward ratio kind of went out of the thing. And the other side of it is like, I don't like to play for fun. If there's not any money involved, right. And I say it's because, people play different and they do, but it's also like, I can't get excited.
Yeah.
Like it's part of the thing for me. So,
but that's literally every salesperson who can't get, or not every, like a lot of salespeople who can't get excited unless there's a big bonus, a big incentive. And like, when you started playing poker, you probably started
just for fun.
That's what I mean. But that's what happens, right?
Yeah. Like I'm so thankful that I found Kung Fu, right? Because like I found Kung Fu and poker at about the same time. And Kung Fu is a very mind-driven practice, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't have to be, but if you want to be good at it, it does, And so a lot of this stuff that I have that allows me to kind of do what I do now comes from like the Kung Fu stuff, don't get too excited, right? Like understand that this thing might lose or and like that all came from like fighting. Like you can do everything right in a fight and still lose. Did you run your game well, or were you just reactive to whatever they were throwing at you? Like, and my teacher, we would spar and he would be like, your shoulder came up. No good. Again, and it was just like, there was such like a focus on doing it right versus like trying to win at all costs. Right. My school was not like tournament driven at all. And my teacher was always like, hey, look, if you're here just to win tournaments, you're only going to focus on the things that allow you to win tournaments. You're not actually building a love for the art and the craft. And this is what's always like, rah, rah. So fast forward, sitting in a coffee shop talking to someone about a website, and I was just like, essentially, kind of like waiting to pounce, almost like, okay, is it hard to make changes? Please say yes, so that way I have something I can now get excited about. And I just have this moment, I call it my Jerry Maguire moment of like, man, this sucks that I can only be excited about a conversation when they're in a bad spot and need us. Right. So then I go back to my sales training class, and I'm like, hey guys, whoa. Right. And I'm not the best person in the class. I'm the best student in the class. Right. So just kind of to put that in the right frame. And I'm like, guys, we should be excited to talk to people, even if they don't need our help. And everyone else in this class, right? We're in the morning class, which is for the more serious people and everything. And so like it's a smaller class. There's about 10 people in there, and everyone is like, John, do you not like money anymore? Like what happened? And I'm like,
By the way, Zig Ziglar conference this weekend. Did you?
yeah, no, like this just happened in the middle of a coffee shop where I'm talking to a prospect. I'm like, this person is awesome and they don't need my help, and I'm just glad for them. Whoa, I can be glad whenever they don't actually need to buy anything from me. And so then coming back into that sales class, like my business partner and my coach got it. And my coach kind of took me off to the side and he was like, hey, just so you know, I'm with you, but that's a hard lesson that most people aren't ready to hear yet. So, you know, just be aware you're going to get some friction when you talk about that. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, you know, this was years ago. Like I wasn't trying to be any of these things that I am now. So I was just like, oh, okay, cool. Like no one cares about my opinion about this stuff anyway. But that's where it shifted. And it wasn't from, you know, sitting down and journaling. I wasn't doing any of that stuff yet. It just happened in the middle of a conversation of like, I want to be happy for this person, even though like they don't need my help. You know, very, very weird situation.
No, I think we all have sort of these moments throughout our sort of life that were just kind of those aha moments where it kind of makes a huge difference. And yeah, being kind is free, but like when you can't be kind, again, it's a sign that you're struggling. I think sort of similar to you, like one of the things that I always think about is, and even before, it's sort of this like thing that I get into, like when I was hopping a call, like I'm still don't consider myself a great public speaker, and sort of doing things like this like makes me nervous. But something that always helps is like when I kind of say, well, I'm meeting John and Jake for the first time, like if this is the only time that I'm ever going to meet with these people, like I want to make sure that like the experience is positive for everyone. Like how do I kind of make sure that I'm as giving and as helpful to the people that I'm interacting with? Because you may never speak to this person again. And do you want to be remembered as someone who's a dick and someone who's like an ass, or do you want to be remembered as someone that like has tried to make a difference in someone else's life? And leading with that has really kind of helped me kind of navigate situations that make me nervous.
Would you talk a little bit more about the wall that is up for a lot of people between the mental and physical states a little bit more? Because I think that's a super also kind of stigma area, particularly of this subject, where that you said something about it earlier about if you train yourself physically and you have to rest and like things like that, and that mental's basically the same thing, like that your mental output can tax you just as much or more as your physical output can. And then that starting there is actually a better spot than your body. It's like your body is actually responding to your brain, right? It's reverse order.
Yeah. So well, it's different. Like there's like, it's called like
depending on the system.
Yeah. Like you want to think about it. Like there's like top down and bottom up strategies that you can think about like from your mental health. So like a top down strategy is when you're leveraging like your prefrontal cortex and you're strengthening that to change your thoughts, and to improve your physiology. So things like meditation, mindset training, different kind of like challenging your thoughts, journaling, for example, that's really dependent on your prefrontal cortex to challenge your emotions from the top down. Then there's also bottom up support, which is actions that you can change. Like one of the best phrases, I think it was from Rich Roll that I learned, is your mood follows your behavior. So you can change your mood by changing your behavior. So on those days when you feel like you can't do anything, like getting some sunshine, working on your sleep, going for that exercise, breath work, for example, these are changes that will affect your physiology from the ground up, pump your brain with all sorts of nootrophins and all these different hormones that will help you get out of a negative state. So you're interrupting that pattern of thinking. So it's like top down and bottom up. But I think to your point around sort of the education piece of like mental health stigma, I think we just need more awareness, more education. Like the best example that I use is I think COVID gave us just like the perfect playbook to tackle stigma. And the good example of this is if you think about people that got COVID very early on, there was a lot of stigma around that. You wouldn't really want to tell anyone that you had COVID. If you got it within the first couple of months, you'd be embarrassed, you'd feel ashamed, you wouldn't know how to get help. But over time, over that span of 2.5 years, across thousands of people talking about it, thousands of people saying, hey, I got COVID, it wasn't that bad, or I got the vaccine. All of these different things that took place, thousands and thousands and thousands of data points every single day. When I got COVID 2 years later, like I thankfully avoided it for 2 years, I was all of a sudden like, oh, my friends reached out, said it's not that bad. I felt comfortable. I felt safe. I was cool with talking about it with people, which is a totally different experience than the start of COVID. So from a mental health standpoint, that's exactly what we need to continue to do. There's still a lot of stigma. It's kind of in that, well, I don't know if I want to talk about it with anyone. Like I'm struggling. Are other people struggling? And the answer is yes. Like other people are struggling every single day. Like it's just getting to that point where it's like these fluid conversations that just happen naturally, similar to, oh, I twisted my ankle playing basketball like this weekend, like I can't really walk. It's like it's the same thing versus, you know, taping up your ankle and trying to hide your walk and like feel like you're okay and not tell anyone. Like it's the exact same thing that we're just not at from a mental health standpoint.
Yeah, and to John's point earlier, is leaders have to lead that conversation, right?
Yeah.
You've got, and you, like you said, with vulnerability, you've got to be the one to start that conversation.
Totally, 1000%.
So you said something earlier, and I'm going to make a jump based upon my own experience. And you were talking about that sometimes the best way to kind of shut down anxiety is to focus on, you know, being a steward, being helpful, providing value, and things like that. And I found with coaching introverts that like one of the best ways to get them to be excited about prospecting is about kind of framing it around the idea of, you know, there's a group of people that only you are going to help, right? And if you are not reaching out to these people, you're making it okay for someone else to do so. Is that really okay? And they get very fired up around it. You know, I never really kind of match that to this thing that we're talking about here. So if you have a struggling salesperson on your team, as opposed to, you know, berating them, putting them on a pip, doing something else like that, have you seen that like kind of put the magnifying lens in of like who we're helping and why we're helping? Like, is that kind of like the preferred method? Like, is that like is that a good go-to for struggling reps?
Yeah, like I think it's a good go-to, but I think again, it's like, how do you do like a baseline check of like how they're doing from like a mental health standpoint? Like, again, if you haven't slept for 2 or 3 weeks, or you've been struggling with sleep for 2 or 3 weeks, and someone tells you, well, today you still got to care about this other person, and here's what we're working on, you'll be like, piss off. Like I just don't have the mental capacity to do that. So you have to go back to kind of like the basics as well. One of the tools that I've kind of created again on Sales Health Alliance is a mental health, like a traffic light works really well, because when someone's feeling overwhelmed, the part of their brain that is like focused on being able to communicate and use their vocabulary is actually going offline. So that's why when a leader asks you like,
how's that deal?
How's that deal? Or how are you feeling? You might respond with, I'm good, I'm fine. You can't really kind of understand what's actually, can't kind of put what you're feeling into words. So using a traffic light of red, yellow, green is a great way to say, you know, what color are you feeling? Are you thriving? Do you feel like you're treading water, or are you totally sinking right now? And then taking that and then connecting it to another piece that says, what's one action? If you're a yellow, what's one action you can take to move you to a green? And as a leader, what's one action that I can take to help move you to that green? If you do nothing else today, what's going to be that one thing that helps move you? Again, like going back to that idea of that mood following your behavior. If you can change your mood by taking the right actions, taking that action will feel incredibly, incredibly hard and super overwhelming. But if you can do that mood, you will break the pattern and shift you towards a more positive state.
Man.
So tell us a little bit more about the Sales Health Alliance. Obviously, they can go check the website, but I'd love to hear, like, what does it mean to you? How are you involved in this? Why is that? It's something that you felt the need to get involved with.
Yeah, I mean, like a Sales Health Alliance is just myself. So it's a company that I started. And it started, the whole purpose is to be a resource first and a business second. So there's roughly 150 free resources on there, articles, podcasts, things that I've created, like with really practical tools to help salespeople navigate different aspects of sales. So check it out. It's lots of good information there. But I was really focused on empowering sellers to reach peak levels of sales performance through better mental health. And then part of that as well, I also lead sort of corporate programs. So working with sales teams directly, leading trainings with teams to help them upskill in areas of stress management and mental health and resilience. So there's individual programs, there's team programs. The goal, I'm now working with them, kind of looking for my first few clients. I have a couple that I'm working with right now that's on sort of a new program. To this point, I've worked with over 6,000 salespeople, but this new program is actually embedding well-being data into sort of a 3-month project that we work on. So measuring how your team is doing from a mental health standpoint and seeing a direct correlation in sales KPIs. Like, how does that affect, if we improve sort of that mental health aspect, how does that affect close rates, number of dials that are being made? Because those are the real leading indicators. How your team is showing up each day is going to determine how well they're performing. So getting really good practical data around, here's the input and here's the direct effect on the outputs.
That's awesome. John and I love talking about inputs versus outputs, because input, there's all sorts of great authors out there, but like James Clear was kind of one of those ones for most people who've read in this space that go, inputs are actually, you come down to the level of your systems, not up to the level of your goals.
Yeah.
So it sounds like mental health, it's the same thing.
1,000%. Yeah. His book's amazing. Like, it was pivotal for me too.
It was, I was on a project last year that was incredibly high stress. It was a startup environment. There were some other issues there, and everybody was like, John, man, how are you not getting like ramped up? And I felt like Ruffalo at the end of, the Avengers. And I was like, I'm always nervous. I'm always, this kind of thing, and, we would have these meetings where, the leader was a little, hard-edged, we'll go with that, and everyone else is like super stressed out, and I'm just like there like focusing on my breathing and like all the other stuff, and it was, you're not going to get it there, you're not going to find this quality there, you have to go build it outside of the thing, and like, to me, this is like a weird martial arts thing, right? Like, everyone thinks they're going to do well in a fight, right? They're like, if I just get mad enough, if I get furious enough, I'm going to win this. No, you're not. Like, and like, there's a sales component to that as well. If you call one more person, if you have one more conversation, like, you're going to get there, you're going to hit that goal. And it's like, you have to, like, that drive has to be there, but it has to be there for the right reasons is like the way that I think about it. But yeah, like you will not find that calmness, that presence, that ability to kind of detach and kind of like, okay, what are they really saying in this moment? If you don't spend time building it in a practice environment, like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Man, Jeff, this has been such a rad conversation, my friend. Thank you for coming in here. And I meant to say this earlier. Anybody who's watching this, go look at his site and go look at all the testimonials of people who have like interacted with Jeff, looked at his stuff, gone through his programs. Like, it is people at Spotify. It is people at some really, really huge organizations and companies, man. So that blew me away. Like, just like the sheer volume of like testimonials and social proof that you have, man. That's significant that you're having a huge impact. So that blew me away. This whole conversation has been awesome. I have some stuff here on the whiteboard. Thank you very much for coming on. This was rad. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Always happy to join a conversation and kind of build more awareness around this. So I appreciate you having me on. And anytime you want to talk MCU stuff, or Marvel stuff, I'm down.
Oh man, don't threaten me with a good time. We'll go off the deep end.
Going to Fan Expo in Toronto this week, which is.
Are you really? Whoa,
yeah,
that's
it'll be my first time. I've never been before. It'll be my first time, so I'm super
excited.
Okay,
are you cosplaying?
I'm not cosplaying.
Okay,
but I'm
okay.
I'm not there yet. But
that's fair.
Yeah.
I like how you said yet.
Yeah.
Like, it's not out of the picture.
Okay. Who would you cosplay if you were there?
I don't know. I'm a big Steve Rogers guy. Like, anything related, I'm super down. So,
nice.
But I like picked up. I don't know if you've ever played the living card game. Oh, nice.
That's my dude.
I don't know if you ever played the living card game Marvel Champions, but I picked it up like during the pandemic, and it is like the best like deck
Really?
building game like ever. It's like a ton of fun.
Man.
Awesome.
The one thing about hosting a podcast, co-hosting a podcast with guests, is that they often ruin your weekend. You just find out these cool things, and then your whole weekend's shot. It's just so it's a pro and a con. So I'll put the link to Jeff's website over there, actually to a specific article he talked about earlier in the episode here about burnout. But you can go there and check out all his resources. So make sure and go check that out and share it with someone, tell someone. And same, I married John. Great conversation. For me, the big nugget was the top down, bottom up approach. There's two ways at the same thing, and it's like, which one makes more sense right now, and which one am I failing at? So it's dude, this is awesome. Very, very cool. So thanks again.
Yeah, of course. Very cool. Well, have a good weekend, guys, and hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming in, and anybody who's on replay, obviously put your comments in there. I'm sure Jeff would be happy to follow up and answer any questions in the comments, and then have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.